Hey, what is going on, guys? Today I am sharing with you my Assetto Corsa Ultimate Photo / Screenshot Guide. If you want to take screenshots that look like this, look very realistic with the motion blur and things like that, then this is the video for you. We'll also be going into Photoshop and I'll be sharing with you my photo editing process. It actually doesn't take as long as you think, but if you want to get motion blur like this and overall some really realistic looking screenshots, then this is the video for you. I will immediately preface though, just get good looking screenshots. You need some good looking graphics settings. So I will leave an iCard above to my graphic settings and post-processing filter, my photorealistic settings. I truly think these are some of the best looking settings in Assetto Corsa that you can have, and they are absolutely fantastic for taking screenshots like this. But without further ado, let's get right into this video. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is change our cameras a little bit in the settings. The F5 cam by default will be on some like orbit cam or something like that. So we need to go into the Assetto Corsa files and change that. So you're going to go to Steam Apps. You're going to go to your Assetto Corsa root folder, go to Systems, CFG, and you're going to look for this one right here, Camera Onboard Free. And you're going to come all the way down here to this one right here, Spherical Chords. It's going to be on a 1 by default, but you're going to want to change it to 0. This will give you free access with WASD to move around however you like, and you will always be attached to the car, so you'll always move with the car, but it'll allow you to get some very dynamic shots, and this is definitely a must-have. If you haven't had this set to 0 yet, and you've been taking Assetto Corsa screenshots, then even if you just did this and did nothing else, you would be doing so much better. But this is definitely a necessity. So what you're going to do when you actually get into Assetto Corsa is you're going to just drive. So again, we're around Shitoko here. I also turned on some rain effects because rain always looks good, gets you some really nice reflections on the ground. But I'm going, you can also crash, it's fine. Assetto doesn't really have a damage model on the vast majority of mods. You can also turn off damage if you do crash. So I'll show you that once we get to it. But yeah, you're just gonna want to drive. Now, if you're trying to have like really realistic photos and you're on a place like Shitoko, I guess you can try to hold a lane. That will never hurt. But I'm trying to go to a very specific place in Shitoko. It's one of my favorite places to take photos around here. We're gonna get there soon. It's the very cool yellow like tile tunnel. It's just past this little bend right here, but man, does Assetto Corsa look absolutely beautiful. Again, if you don't have my settings, I highly recommend you check them out. But here we go. Hold a lane, come through here. Beautiful. Such a cool place to take photos, has really nice reflections, and beyond that, that's where I'm going to stop it for me. But if you need to do like a whole lap or whatever, just go wherever you want your photo to be taken. So now if you're in Shitoko, you're going to be somewhere random, but you can just spawn right here. Bada bing, bada boom. If you did it right with the first thing, changing around that 1 and 0 in the file, you'll be getting this right here. Now we're going to want to skip to where we want to be. This is a really cool photo as well. Sadly, this does look a little blown out, which does kind of suck, so I guess I'm going to have to go out here, but something that you can always mess around with in editing and while you're doing this in Assetto Corsa Live as well. So I'm going to take a photo right here. I think this looks really cool. Get a little closer maybe. Just don't want it to look super like burned out or blown out with the lighting. So now what you're going to do is you're going to want to hit on your photo mode once you get to this point. You stop your camera where you want it to be roughly. You want to open up this. If you've never opened up this app before, it's just in your Assetto Corsa apps right here. Photo mode, bada bing, bada boom, bada bam. Now there's a lot of settings that we need to go over, but the first one and the most important one is your zoom / FOV, the game calls it. You're going to want to get a nice FOV, one that'll make your car be in frame, taking up most of the frame if that's what you're going on. If you're focusing on the car, if you want the car to be more of an accent piece, then you can just keep it out more zoomed out. but you can play around with that, whatever you're trying to go for with your photo. Next up, you also have your roll, so do not use this. This will take you out of F5 mode and just get you into a basic mode. You want to use G and F on your keyboard. Sorry for hitting the mic. Yeah, F will turn it this way, G will turn it this way. Actually, scratch that. It's the other way around. My keyboard lights are off. But once you get here, I'm actually not going to have a lot of roll in this photo simply because this is the thumbnail photo, and I want it to look good with a text at the top. But if you don't have to worry about that, then you can have the car take up the whole screen, no problem. I'm going to see, yeah, that looks, actually that kind of works. That doesn't look too bad. I'll, decisions. I'll do that, actually. That looks really good right there. So now you have your aperture settings. I believe that's aperture. Actually, no, aperture's lighting. Your F settings. Basically, this is how blurry or how clear do you want the background to be from your focus point. I personally, for pretty much all my screenshots, leave it on f32 or f22. You can play around with it, but when you have shutter speed, it's going to blur the background for you anyway. So yeah, I like to keep mine at f32 most of the time because it makes the car as clear as possible. But I do recommend still having some depth of field in there as well, just because it will make the image look a bit more 3D. Now, shutter speed. So the faster your car is moving, unless your intended effect with the photo is to have a massive like a blur of colors as you fly by, if you want to still be able to see what the background is. If you're going fast, you're going to want to lower shutter speed. If you're going really slow in your car, you're going to want a higher shutter speed. You can play around with this slider, but for most things, I keep it from 160 to about 125. Usually that's my range. These look the best for most things. Again, you can play around with it and see what you think looks the best. Finally, this is the only other real place you're going to be messing with, and for this photo, I'm not even going to be messing with it. You have your lighting angle and your time offset. Now, you won't be able to see it from in here, really, but time offset will change the time. So if you start at night, let's say, and you decide that you want a daytime photo as well, you can just change this slider, go back, and as you can see just by the lighting change, it's now the daytime, but we can go back into here and keep it nighttime because obviously that's what I'm going for. And lighting angle will change where the sun is at. So let's say you're in a really shaded area and you want to make it a bit more sunny, you can change the lighting angle and it will change a little bit where the sun is, or it'll change a lot where the sun is. Again, all things you can play around with. You can also have your headlights on or off. If you want to force them on or force them off, you can, like your brake lights and things like that. You also have force flames, and if you're using a low shutter speed, it doesn't really work very well, but if you're on like a really high shutter speed, like literally like a 1 second where it's just a blur, you can get some really cool photos with it. But a lot of the times I would stick to when your car is actually shooting flames. You can also hide damage and dirt if you need to, just I guess if you went in the dirt or you got a damaged car and it has like physical damage on it, you can do that. You can also hide the driver as well, but for the vast majority of photos, unless they're like stationary, that's gonna look quite weird. But finally, once you have all your settings dialed in, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more here. Actually, that's probably good with text. Alright, I think that looks pretty cool. I would go with a little bit more of a dynamic photo, but just for a thumbnail, I'm just going to roll with some nice space at the top. You're going to hit this, it's going to render, and bada bing, bada boom, you have a nice Assetto Corsa screenshot. Now, you don't just need to take one, you can take multiple. You can take as many as you would like. Now, I have another idea here. I do want to get a back photo. This is just for me personally of going into the tunnel. This is always a really cool photo as well. Get maybe there. That looks pretty cool. Do that, and pretty much don't really need to change much else. I think that looks quite cool. So besides that, if you've taken all the photos that you want to, you are done in Assetto Corsa. So now we're going to move into Photoshop. I have Photoshop 2021, I believe. You can use whatever Photoshop you want. The layout doesn't really change much. And if you're using another photo editing software, then you may be able to adapt some of these things, but I only know Photoshop, so I can't help you much beyond that. So we have the two images here. I'll edit both of these because we can pretty much just repeat most of the process on this one. The first thing you're going to want to do is hue and saturation. I always like to bump up the saturation just a tiny bit, especially once we do some more things and filters here. The extra saturation boost will look quite nice. Next up, color balance. I like to add a little bit of blue. I find some I like to add a little bit of blue. I find that a lot of times Assetto Corsa can be a little bit warm. Other times it can be a little bit cold as well. But for this, I want just a tiniest little bit of blue. I think that makes it look nice. This is also a great way to white balance as well. If you aren't know what the term white balance is, basically it's getting true white in the image. I think that looks pretty damn white. I think this car is maybe a little bit of an off-white, so we can't fully use it, but I like the colors of that. And besides that, this is all we're really going to mess with here. You can do some contrast stuff as well if it's like a really blown out image, or just like very gray. But the main thing we're going to want to do is come into filter. Lens correction is the first one, and you're going to want to play with your vignette. It's going to darken the edges. As you can see, if you go really drastic, it's going to fully darken it, but I just like a little bit. It helps give a little bit more depth to the image as well. But the big one, the big thing that's going to make your Assetto Corsa screenshots look really realistic is camera raw filter right here. So what you're going to want to do is it's these three settings that you're going to want to mess with the most: texture, clarity, and dehaze. So texture is going to be the amount of texture in the image. As you can see, if I drag the texture slider all the way down, this gets very blurry, and it overall kind of looks very like just messy, very smooth. And if you add a lot of texture, as you can see, it looks a bit more rough. It's not exactly like a sharpness setting, but it is a little bit similar. I'm going to keep this at 0. I think this looks quite nice for where it's at. But clarity and dehaze are the big ones. I like a lot of clarity. This is going to bring out a lot of reflections in the image. And you can also definitely hit some dehaze as well. This is basically just like a contrast slider. Don't go too overboard with it, but I think a little bit always helps. Now, I know this looks really bad and really gray, but as you can see, when we hit it with the saturation, we can actually add a tiny bit more. It looks a lot better. I think this does look a little bit sickly. I kind of need to add a little bit more blue to this. But yeah, I think that looks quite decent. This isn't a perfect photo. It's a little bit blown out. I could have definitely gone back in and done a little bit more. But as you can see here, like on the chrome rims, it has really nice reflections on the exhaust tip as well. Overall, I think this is a quite good photo. Now we can do the same to this one as well. This one might be a little bit better. So again, we'll go over the steps. Hue and saturation. I like a tiny bit of saturation. Color balance it. I actually think the colors on this look quite nice, but I think maybe a little kick of yellow might help it. Vignette time, lens correction right here. Go to vignette. I'll give it that. I don't really have like a specific number. I just kind of click around randomly on the slider till I think something looks good. And finally, camera raw filter. Give it a lot of clarity. Dehaze it just a little bit, and maybe give it a little bit more of a bump in saturation. And there you go. We just transformed this image from this. I'll pull up the original here to this. Oh, that's that's the second one. Good job, Jake. So there we go. That is what we have done. I'll just do this, I guess. So we went from this all the way down to that. And that just makes it look really good. I love the reflections. Reflections are what make things look really realistic in video games. And this, in my opinion, especially with these chrome wheels, looks really nice. It does give you a lot more of a darker look. If you want a little bit more of like the hazy look, then you can also keep playing with that dehaze filter, not really do as much, or you can actually, even if you really want to, it'll stick from this, so it won't really be the full effect, but you can add more haze if you want to, if this is like an effect you're going for. But overall, I like where this one is at. So finally, I guess, you hit File, you hit Export as Quick PNG, and then it'll already be, hopefully, in your Assetto Corsa root folder, so you can just overwrite it just like that, and bada bing, bada boom, you have some really beautiful looking screenshots in Assetto Corsa. So yeah, that was my full photo editing tutorial. Again, this isn't really particularly my favorite image, but I do think it was a great teacher, and you can play around with it. You'll get better the more images you do, the more screenshots you take. If you're not doing thumbnails, again, you can leave out the headroom, always having the car as the focal point in the center. If you're trying to focus on the car is always the best way to do, kind of like this one, although it still does have a little bit of headroom, but it doesn't look that bad. Overall, I think these are some really cool images, so I hope you learned something, and if you did, a like and a sub would mean a lot. And if you have any more tips for me, I'm also down to learn, or if you want to have some tips for some beginners as well, maybe you're a more experienced Assetto Corsa screenshot taker, then you can drop those down below. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have a good one, guys.